And good evening. Welcome to Native Nations. I'm your host, David Liberty, an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. And our special guest tonight is Dayna Jones. Dayna wrote a piece in a journal called Margins at the Law. Is that Law?
Law at the Margins.
Law at the Margins. Regarding the occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, which is ongoing as we speak this evening, Thursday. Welcome to Native Nations. And before we get started with speaking with Dayna, I have a special little book to share with everybody because, you know, I do book reviews regularly on this show. And I just read this one, a gift from my mom. And this is about Pop Warner and Jim Thorpe and the Carlisle Indian School, which was established back in the late 1800s, 1880 something. Or no, it was the 1904. Anyway, after the school was established, they really got into football. Football was an up-and-coming sport. And these Indian boys were small but fast, and they used their speed and their wiles and their guile and trickery, and it's a great story of how they were able to overcome great difficulties because the school was not treating them well, to become one of the top football teams in the nation back in 1910, 1911. And this is a pretty good historical account of what happened. Tells you us about Pop Warner, who became very famous as a football coach. But it was the Indian boys that he had on his team that helped to innovate as much as the coach did, because they had their own ideas about passing and running and blocking and tackling, and it comes through in this book. It's a really good read, and I highly recommend The Real All-Americans by Sally Jenkins. Pick it up at your local bookstore. Okay, Dayna. Thank you very much for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And I know that you are part of the Native American
Law Student
Association at Lewis and Clark College.
I am.
And I have some friends who've gone to Lewis and Clark Law School before. It's a well-known college. I'm glad that you're going through the program.
Me too.
And where are you from originally?
I grew up in Florida, but I came here from Colorado, from Colorado State University. So that's where I was when I found out about Lewis and Clark from one of my professors there, and applied here and got in, and we're loving it.
So you have an undergraduate degree in
I
what?
do. I have a double undergraduate. I have political science and environmental sociology, and it was actually my environmental sociology degree where I became alerted to Native issues through the lens of environmental justice. I had a really awesome professor. Her name was Stephanie Mallon, and she wrote a book and taught us a lot on the nuclear, with the uranium and the plutonium and all those issues surrounding the Navajo Nation and the Four Corners area. And that's what really prompted me to be where I am now in my studies and in my path. She was really wonderful at just raising awareness to this huge issue that is right underneath all of our noses that we don't talk about, and we certainly don't give it the airtime that it needs. So,
well, at Lewis and Clark now, your main course or your area of interest is what?
Native and environmental. And I'm doing both. And Lewis and Clark offers a certificate in both. So this summer they actually have a really awesome visiting professor. Frank Pommersheim is his name. And I'll be taking his class. And we have a really, really remarkable Native law program. Even though everybody knows Lewis and Clark for their environmental law, our Native law program is really, really wonderful. So I'm doing both, with the hopes of doing environmental justice after this in the Native community.
Well, you're not a tribal member, from what I understand. Maybe a little bit somewhere if you really investigate your background. That could be. But the issues that you were writing about is very important to some friends of mine that live down in the Burns area.
Yes.
For the viewers who don't know, I worked at John Day for 13 years. I was a drill rig operator for the Forest Service. Became a journeyman and well established in my profession. We worked with the Burns Paiute Tribe. While I was with the Forest Service, I was the Native American Program Manager. We would go down to the Burns Reservation to recruit for employees for the Forest Service, because it makes us look good to hire Native Americans to work for the Forest Service. And I made my supervisor look really good, because we recruited several Burns Paiute to work for the Forest Service that year. And I met Jarvis's dad, Kenny, who was a great guy. We worked together. He was in the road crew down there in Burns. So I was able to meet Jarvis Kennedy, who, for those of you who may not know, Jarvis has been the main speaker, or the most recognizable speaker, I would say, for the Paiute tribe, speaking out against the occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. So I just want to give you a little background about what I know about the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. I used to hunt ducks and geese down there, and when I was working in the State Historic Preservation Office for the state archaeologist, I got to review several different site reports that the BLM submitted from that area. I don't remember if they were in the refuge or nearby, but got familiar with some of the archaeology through direct experience reading reports of what was found in and around the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. And it is a rich archaeological resource, the refuge and the whole surrounding area. Even on the forest, the Malheur Forest, I would run into sites of lithic scatters, what you call obsidian chips that are just flaked off and laying around. You'd see them regularly. And so I know that the tribe has worked with the refuge, and the artifacts that they're holding have been something that have been a real issue, among other things. I mean, we could talk about a lot, Dayna. But right off the bat, those artifacts that recently they showed a video of them going through, opening the boxes and looking at them. And I didn't hear the video because I just wanted to see the gist of what was going on. But those are under lock and key and not to be disturbed by anybody other than who's responsible for them right now. And the archaeologists work in agreement with the tribe to maintain those artifacts at the refuge. And I know Jarvis was worried about those artifacts showing up on eBay or Craigslist. He made some comment about that.
Yeah, I mean, look who's going through them. You know, you wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of disturbing to know that the vulnerability of all the records, the employee records, that their addresses, their phone numbers, their social security numbers could be in there, and they're vulnerable as employees of the refuge. So I want to tell you a little about the Paiute people, just historically what I know. They were seed eaters. They were called themselves the Wada Tika. And there was another group nearby that was the elk eaters. And that was a similar name, something Tika. And then there was another group that was further away that had another name of what they ate. I think it was rabbit, the rabbit eaters. So there were three distinct groups in the southeastern Oregon. They spoke the same language and they interacted regularly. Their families, they were all related. And they would exploit different resources in their own region. So the elk were abundant in the North Fork of the Malheur. And I've hunted that area for elk before, and it's beautiful country. So you had elk eaters. The refuge itself is a huge lake that covers like 10 square miles or something, depending on the water levels. Sometimes it's dried out before. But this year it'll be big and deep. And it had a type of it was called wokus, a water lily, that they would harvest in the lake. And there were just tons of water lilies and tons of seeds. And so they had all the food they wanted to harvest out in the lake. They would take their boats out and harvest the seeds. The Klamath people do the similar thing down in Klamath Lake, where they would harvest the similar seeds that the Paiutes eat. I'm not sure if they still do that practice or not on the refuge. I would hope that they do, or I know some of those plants have been going extinct because of the carp and other animals that are invading the refuge, in the water especially. Carp is a big problem. So the Paiute ended up having a large reservation just that encompassed most of the southern part of the Malheur National Forest. In the Malheur River was the central part of the reservation. And because of the late battles they had, the conditions that they were under were not good. And they rejected their conditions and went on the warpath.
Right.
And the Paiutes
They were
ended up...
starving, though, so it was very...
And they needed food.
Right.
They needed
It's
clothing.
very reasonable. Yeah.
Water, just the basics of life.
Right.
And they had to revolt to try and get that. And they went on the warpath. They came through Burns. They came up the South Fork of the John Day River. And their fight went all the way up into the Umatilla country. And it was actually some of my relatives who were responsible for taking out the leader, Chief Egan.
Oh, wow.
Which, it doesn't make sense now except to know that historically the Paiutes were the enemies of the Umatillas. So when the fight came that far north, the Umatillas joined with the army and helped to defeat the Paiutes. I'm sorry to say, but that's a part of the history. That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, their reservation was taken away. There was a provision about not making war against the United States, and they broke that provision of the treaty. But we know historically treaty provisions have been broken repeatedly by both parties, and it was a giant reservation. They lost it all, and in the 60s, when there was other tribes that were trying to get recognized, re-recognized after they'd lost recognition, the Paiutes were able to be recognized by the federal government and have a small reservation. Like one section, I think, they got 640 acres or something to have their reservation just north of the town of Burns. And they've been eking out a living, trying to survive in Burns, maintaining some of their traditions. They still go out and dig roots. They still go out and pick berries. I'm not sure if they're gathering seed or not, but they are trying to carry on as many of the traditions as they can. And I'm really happy that Jarvis has stepped forward and spoken out against the occupation and really is representing the tribe well, telling them to get the hell out. That's what I do. That's what I'd say. So, Dayna, I know your perspective is a lot different than mine on this because there's so many legal aspects of these guys are saying this land was ours and you took it, the federal government took our land and we want to give it back to the people. And it's kind of a skewed history of federal lands and appropriation of lands. Tell us about your perspective on this whole occupation.
Well, my perspective, I'm just, flabbergasted that they chose this particular space to take up arms for their cause, because this is land that was illegally settled by ranchers. It was not even land that the ranchers, had at some point
given to them by treaty. They were actually squatting on this land to begin with, from square one.
You
the
can call them
Harney Basin.
squatters.
Yes.
It's okay. They're squatters.
Well, yeah, I got some flack for calling them domestic terrorists in my piece, but I stand by that. I genuinely believe that according to the FBI's definition of domestic terrorist, these people meet that definition because they are armed and dangerous, and they are trying to coerce the civilian population into joining their rebellion, and they're trying to intimidate the government into meeting their wishes, and that's what the FBI requires for domestic terrorism. So,
well, it is intimidating when the AR-15s that they're strapped on their chest, that they always have their hand on the near the trigger, on the grip, near the trigger. You know, why do you carry your AR-15 like this if you're not a threat?
Right, and they came into a town hall meeting doing that this week, like in Burns, and they spread out all over so that they kind of surrounded the perimeter, armed. That's very intimidating when you're trying to have a conversation as a town with someone openly armed, and you know. So I personally still stand by that terminology, but I feel like this is more about them trying to, the Bundys specifically, trying to avoid the fact that they owe the government $1.1 million. And they're trying to, I think, use this as a scapegoat, as an excuse to not pay that judgment that they owe the BLM, because the Hammonds, who they're fighting for, have already turned themselves in. You know, so there is no issue there. The people don't want them there. The Paiutes don't want them there. They have no claim to this land. The spokeswoman for the Paiute Tribe was actually really concerned about the possibility of this land, just say hypothetically, getting turned over to ranchers. That's not going to happen, but say it happened. They're going to unleash all their cattle on these wetlands and overgraze it and absolutely ruin everything that the Paiutes utilize this land for already. So, I mean, the waterfowl that go there are very sensitive, and, you know, wetlands are very sensitive areas, and the fact that the Bundys have a history of overgrazing, and that's what has gotten them into so much trouble already, just goes to show that they have no respect for the land. They are not looking for this land to be returned to rightful owners. They are trying to get out of any commitment that or obligation they have to the federal government. That's the way that I see this situation. I don't see them looking for understanding or truth or patriotism. I think it's all just, you know, a flag to hide underneath with no real understanding or purpose behind it.
Well, one of their occupiers was under the blue tarp. Do you remember that? Early in the occupation, some guy was hiding under a blue tarp, just out, sitting on a chair with his machine gun or whatever he had with him under a blue tarp, and he was being interviewed by the media. I thought that was really classic. What a way to hide right there in front of everybody. But the Bundys and the Hammonds, the Hammonds in particular I can speak to. I know a little bit of history about the Hammonds because there's a guy named Denzel Ferguson that everybody out there should know. Denzel and Nancy Ferguson wrote a book called The Sacred Cow at the Public Trough. And it should be required reading at Lewis and Clark Law School for every law
I'll
student.
pass that on.
Denzel Ferguson, The Sacred Cow at the Public Trough. And Denzel worked at the Malheur Nations Wildlife Refuge, and he himself was threatened by Dwight Hammond. His life was threatened by Dwight Hammond. Yeah, serious threats. And Hammond has made other serious threats against employees of the refuge. And Denzel Ferguson was one of them. So the refuge employees are particularly scared right now because of that history of threats being made in the past. And nothing was carried through, but you never know when somebody's going to blow up and decide to carry out their threat that they made. Fortunately, he's in prison right now, so he can't make that.
Right.
But he's going to be out and back, and for a person who has a history of that kind of behavior, the employees justifiably should be scared.
Right.
And I guess some of them have had to move out of the community. They're
It's
fearing for their
horrible.
lives.
It's really shaking up the community, and the response to this is not adequate. The federal response is not adequate, just even the media response. This is a huge situation right now of a community being turned upside down by this small group of rebels, for lack of a better term, and it's not being responded to properly. And I can't help but wonder if it's just because they're a bunch of white guys with cowboy hats. If, like we were saying earlier, if it was the Paiutes in there, what would have happened by now? There's no way this would have been going on for 3 weeks, and that's unfortunate, but it's true. This is a situation of white privilege. I think it's clear as it gets, the fact that this has been going on for almost 3 weeks now, and our governor has just now called for the president to take action, because not much is,
Do you
happening.
know what was in that letter that the governor sent to Obama? Did you happen to see it?
I did. I read it, and she was discussing how much this is costing the state of Oregon and the people in the city. I think we're looking at over $500,000. They said it's about $60,000 to $70,000 a day, and they're hoping. The plan is to foot the bill to the federal government because they're not doing anything about it at this time, and the state of Oregon doesn't want to have to pay for this. But who's gonna? They are just causing so much unrest, and it's like who's gonna pay for this at the end of the day? Who's gonna pay for it? They're coming to and from these hotels freely. They're
getting mail.
Yeah, they're getting mail, they're getting donations, they're making
the post office will deliver it to them.
ridiculous lists of things that they want, and we're allowing people to go in and out, and meanwhile they're holding, priceless artifacts to the Paiute people hostage in there. They're occupying federal land, they're causing fear in the community, they're making huge waves, and we're not holding them accountable at all at this point. It's insane that this has lasted 3 weeks.
Well, it's it was a locked building. Somehow they got keys. I guess there was some saboteur or somebody who gave them keys. That's all I heard was they had keys. That's how they got in. And clearly that would be considered trespassing just right off the bat, and then to stay there and to take advantage of the electricity that's offered and the hot water or the heat and the roof over your head, and not paying any rent or just living free off the government. This is quite a deal these guys are getting, and with cooperation of the feds, the cooperation of the sheriff, the state police. Haven't heard a word from them other than somebody rolled a van, got in trouble for that.
Right.
Another guy was stopped for a taillight out. Turned out he had a warrant for his arrest. And
felon in possession
with
of
the
a gun,
which he's probably not the only one in the compound with felon in possession of a firearm, but we don't need to go there. There's enough violations already occurring as far as I'm concerned. Why is the federal government supporting these? You said white privilege. It's more redneck privilege is what I kind of like to call it, because they're rednecks. They've got guns and they're cattle ranchers. Well, some of them think that they're rednecks. I know mechanic from Phoenix doesn't really qualify. If you're a mechanic from Phoenix, you're not a cowboy. I don't think. Even if you put a cowboy hat on, that doesn't make you a cowboy. But I was especially struck by how they always have their hands right next to the trigger. And then last time I saw that happening was when somebody had tried to scale the wall at the White House, and security was all running around, and they all had their hands right next to the trigger just in case something happened in a second. They'd be able to respond.
They think they're tough
instantly.
guys. I mean, yeah, they're out there to intimidate and bully and get their way.
But they say they're constitutionalist.
Right, and that's, I think, when my editor from Law at the Margins came to me with this, she had two concerns. One was the constitutional side, and the other was the Paiute, because Law at the Margins specializes in marginalized people. That's why it's Law at the Margins. It's the website focuses around that.
Makes sense. I hadn't thought about that.
And then but the constitutional side of it, it's just, they're so hypocritical. Everything about these guys is just, a running contradiction, because they're, wanting rights to land that was squatted on originally by the ranchers to be given to the ranchers. But then they're saying that it's constitutionally theirs, even though it's federal land, which federally, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, gives the federal government authority for interactions with the tribes. So at the moment that land was handed over to the government from the Paiutes, from the treaty after the Bannock War, that was federal land, period. And then Teddy Roosevelt made it a refuge in 1908 for the waterfowl and the birds. It has never been private land, ever, held by ranchers. So the fact that they're hiding behind the Constitution for this is just baffling to me. I don't understand even where the supposed argument is. It's so transparently not there.
And it seems to change depending on what day or who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. The protest started over the Hammonds being sent to prison. So people came out to protest the Hammonds getting sent to prison. They didn't want them to go to prison, and the first demands were, we're not leaving until the Hammonds come out of prison.
And a few days later, the Hammonds just turned themselves in, and that was that.
And apparently they're not supporting this occupation. The Hammonds haven't come out and said this is a great thing and everybody should go up there and
they've laughed at
take
it.
over.
Yeah.
So it's not got the support of the Hammonds themselves. And the other claim that they've come out with recently is they're not leaving until all the land is given back to the ranchers and miners and loggers. Am I getting that right?
Yes, and the land that was never theirs to begin with. So, yeah.
There's not much logging to do on the refuge unless there's a few short junipers that you want to cut down. I wouldn't log it. And there's no real mining in the area that wasn't already panned out long ago. So the ranchers are trying to desperately hold on to this lifestyle that you've got to eat this beef and you got to put cholesterol in your blood veins and it's such an archaic lifestyle. We need to move. Even the Indian people have moved into the 21st century. We've got a casino. We're marketing ourselves. We're developing other professions for our tribal members, and it seems like the cattle ranchers just want to maintain the cattle ranching as it was in the 1800s and should be for henceforth from here on out.
And expand it more and more and more and not be held accountable. They don't want any type of limitations or accountability or responsibility connected to that. It's just take. There's no responsibility to other people, other ranchers, other interests, the land. It's just one for myself, just what can I take from this? What can I glean from this? And that's what it's all about.
Yes. And in some ways it's hard to understand what they're about. We can kind of guess, but their heads seem to be swirling around different things. I'm not sure if they know really what they stand for.
It just changes, like you said, depending on the day and the person you talk to. There's so much infighting between them, and I forget his name, but the one left to go to a hotel. Did you read about that? I don't know. And then
The drunken brawl.
Yes. And then some other people came to visit him, and he drank all the way the money that people had donated to helping their cause. He just went and got drunk and said they were all traitors, and it's just pathetic.
Yeah, they're a well-regulated militia.
Yeah. I told one of my friends, I said, if what they were doing wasn't so horrifically actually important, because it's so easy to make fun of them, and then it almost like trivializes it with the Al-Qaeda and this and that, but I said, it reminds me of redneck coleslaw wrestling. It's just like, it's almost entertaining, but it's really not. You don't want to encourage it, but you're like, wow, how is this even really happening? How are they sustaining themselves this long?
I know.
Why hasn't someone come in here and just put the brakes on it?
Yeah, arrest them all.
Yeah, arrest them all, put them in jail, and give them the bill for everything that they're racking up right now.
Yeah, at least pay for the heat. Jeez. It's been cold out there at Burns. It always is in the wintertime. So we have a film clip of Jarvis Kennedy, and there's a real good chance that I can get Jarvis Kennedy on my cell phone, and we'll put him on speaker, and we'll have a little talk with Jarvis. He should be back home in Burns by now. So if we can run that tape of Jarvis, I will give him a call while we're showing that. And if he's on speaker, we'll go right to our interview with Jarvis, our discussion with Jarvis Kennedy.
But thank you guys for being here. Bundy needs to go home. Just need to stand together and stay strong. Keep it peaceful. Sooner or later, he's gonna get cold and go home. He loves, the Harney County winters over there. So, like I said before, who knows what would happen if it was me and my Native brothers that took up arms and occupied a federal building or even that refuge out there. What would happen? Do you think the government will let us access and go back into town and eat, get supplies, and have people out there bringing us wood, keeping us warm? Why is that power still on? No. I'd like to thank the law enforcement over there for protecting the Harney County people. As a Burns Paiute Tribal member and councilman, we only had one tribal police watching our res over there. So a bunch of community members, as in men, stood up on the hill and built a fire, and we were in contact with the police to watch over our people, like in the old days when the cavalry were following us and killing us off. So we were up there helping him. So we're working along with our tribal police there just to protect our people. And I want to thank you guys for being here. It means a lot. And like I said, they need to go. They do. They need to go. What would they do if I went into their cemeteries where their grandparents are buried and sitting there occupied and driving heavy equipment around over their graves? I could always go out and loot their cemetery, but I have more respect than that.
There you go.
So does my people.
There you go.
So, as again, let's stay strong, keep this peaceful, and sooner or later they can go home. We got to work with each other. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for guys all showing up in this Oregon weather. It's awesome, isn't it? Yeah. So, you guys be cool, and we'll see you guys at the next one.
Viewers a little background about what's going on down there, but we wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth. Hello everybody, we're back, and we have Jarvis Kennedy on the phone he recently touched down back home on the res in north of Burns. Hey Jarvis, how are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Real good.
All right.
We know you've been running around. You were here in town, then you went to Boise. Now you're in Burns. We really appreciate the hard work you're doing on behalf of your people, Jarvis. Way to go.
Well, thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah, we've been trying.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, you're doing good. We've been trying to figure out where exactly these guys are coming from, and we're not sure. And I don't know if you can put any more light on the subject, Jarvis, but tell us how you feel about this occupation.
Well, like I said, they're on our burial grounds out there in our winter gathering place, and I think these people didn't know what they were occupying just beside the refuge. You know, and I don't see why they occupied the refuge when they're squabbled with the BLM. And we got a BLM office here in Hines, Oregon, which is right next to Burns, so I don't know.
Yeah, the squabble with the BLM, and then they occupy a refuge managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yeah.
That's why Dayna and I were saying that they're coming from a lot of different directions, and we're not sure which way they're going. We're just scared because they're guns.
Yeah.
They got guns and their fingers right near the trigger.
Yeah, they're packing heat, that's for sure. They, you know, when they come to town, they're like 10 to 15 cars deep, you know, pickups.
Really?
And, you know, they don't go around by themselves. They're like a little gang there with all their cars. And, you know, imagine if a bunch of natives did that or did what they're doing. You know, if we occupied anything type of building like that, we'd already been dealt with. We sure wouldn't be having our power on or access to town and access to supplies and, you know.
I mean, the Postal Service delivering their mail. That is just incredible in itself, if there wasn't so many other things that were ridiculous about this event.
Yeah.
Dayna, do you have a question for?
Yeah, I wanted to know, when they're going into town, 10 and 15 cars deep, is there no response from the local police department? Do you know why they're just being allowed to go to and from? Is it because they're armed? Are they just trying to avoid a deadly conflict? Or kind of, what's the word on that? How is that even allowed to be happening?
Well, just on my own point of view, like I said, I think they're just getting a bunch of logs off their license plates, seeing who's who, and trying to figure out. Because here in Harney County, everybody has a scanner. Mm-hmm. And everybody listens on anything. It's a small community with 3 stoplights in the whole town.
Wow.
You know, and that's my perspective of doing it. They're just seeing who's who, who's here, who has warrants and so forth. I'm not really positive about that, but, you know, like I said, they're free to roam, you know.
Well, and I was struck, Jarvis, by the video I saw today of them going through the artifacts that were in the collection there at the refuge. I was just appalled that they could be doing that and nobody is doing anything about it.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the issue that's, as you said, is going on now. And it just tells you how the government still is not looking at the native people as people, how I see it. You know, if there's anybody, it's kind of like somebody else going through your grandma's heirlooms, your great-grandma's heirlooms, and picking through it, looking at it, and, you know, you don't know if they're putting it in their pockets, you don't know if they're putting it on eBay. You know, I heard about that video, but I don't want to get any more upset about it, so I didn't even watch it, you know.
Yeah, I couldn't listen to the video. There was enough to just see what was going on. As additionally, they are using a Caterpillar now to build new roads around the refuge as well, damaging the archaeology of the area.
Yeah, I mean, you know, how would that Bundy feel if I go to where his grandparents and parents are built, their families are buried? You know, I could go over there with the grader and occupy that. How would he feel about that? You know? Because that's what they're doing.
Yeah, well,
and it gets me mad, and, you know,
sorry to get you so upset, Jarvis.
No, it's fine. It's just how it is.
Yeah.
And he doesn't realize what he's doing. His followers don't realize what he's doing. I mean, what do I got to do to prove a point? Go up to this Burns cemetery and grab me a shovel and some arms and start digging?
Right.
That's what he's doing. You know, that's how I feel about it, and there's a lot of other natives that feel about it, and a lot of other non-natives that are feeling about it.
Yeah, it seems like the community hasn't given him much support.
Yeah.
Burns, the people of Burns have tried to run him out, but that didn't seem to matter.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of fed up with it, and they just need to go and get out of here, go back where they came from, or whatever. Like the Harney County residents, we don't need somebody standing up for us.
Yeah, you guys have been doing fine.
We're in the middle of nowhere, and you know, we survived without them. We were here before them. We're going to be here when they're gone.
That's right.
Have the Paiutes actually?
You know, we don't need a bunch of clowns coming in here trying to stand up for us. You know, we got our own 2 feet. We don't need these guys. And
Yeah.
it's just sickening, man. I mean, it is.
That's right. It is.
You know, and you know, what would he do if I call up all my native brothers across America and let's go occupy his his dad's ranch?
Okay, give me the call. I'll come.
No, but I'm not saying to do it, but I'm just saying, what if that happened?
Yeah, it's clearly a double standard.
Yeah. And what do you think the government would do to me? Do you think my face would be like Leonard Peltier
Well, you remember
from
what
back in the 70s?
or the Dan
That man's
sisters.
still in prison 30, 40 years later, and they still can't prove his bullets killed those federal agents.
Yeah, and they beat up the BLM guys, beat up the Dan sisters, taking their
Yep.
cattle away from them when they had
Yeah.
rights to the land.
Yep.
So that was kind of
They're
sad.
Twisting those old ladies' arms, marching them off. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah,
So,
it's,
you know, believe me, I'm pissed off about it. I don't know what I can do or whatever, but the only thing I can do is try to keep calm.
well, we sure support you here, Jarvis. We're
Yeah.
behind you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, but, you know, I'm kind of hard-headed. I could run out there and raise some hell, too, but I got to think about the little kids on the Paiute land, you know? I got to think about my elders.
Yeah,
Because every reaction, what happens, has an action. Every bad action has a reaction,
yeah.
you know? But you just think about that. If I was out there doing it or did anything like that, I would be beat down, shot already, in handcuffs, living in the dark, freezing my butt off out there,
Yeah,
not having no internet access,
that's
nothing.
right. No mail, no nothing.
No, nothing. You know, they can. I hope Bundy takes his toys with him, man. Jeez.
Yeah.
You guys see that?
Yeah, they didn't seem too happy about getting those dildos.
Well, we all seen Brokeback Mountain. Well, I haven't, but, you know.
I got the
Just
gist
get
of
lonely
it.
on
I
the
didn't see
prairie,
it.
I guess.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We don't
I'm not
know.
a cowboy.
No.
I mean, I can't even call these guys cowboys because cowboys got respect.
Well, I thought Bundy was a mechanic in Phoenix or something. You can't be
I don't know.
you can't be a
Just,
cowboy. Well,
I don't know.
Jarvis, we probably shouldn't
Yeah.
take up too much of your time.
Oh, that's fine.
If you've got
Yeah,
any
okay.
any comments that you'd like to make before we go.
Well, you know, I'd like to thank the people of America, United States, across the world for supporting the Burns Paiute Tribe and the refuge and BLM. You know, keep us in prayers. That's all we ask. We ain't asking for any type of bloodshed or anything. Just try to keep it peace, and you know, I'm all riled up. Thanks. But you know, we got to keep our heads cool.
Yeah, we need some police action.
Yeah, we
That's
need
what
something. I mean,
I'd like to
God,
see.
I don't know.
If
But
you-
we just pray for us. Pray for me.
We will.
Pray for
We will.
our tribal council, our chairwoman. She's an older lady, and she's going through the same stuff I'm going through.
Oh yeah, lots of stress.
So, so you know, she don't need it. And,
Okay.
I don't know. Anyways, just pray for us over here in Burns, Oregon, and the Harding County residents, if you guys could.
Okay,
We will.
Jarvis, we will.
We absolutely will.
All right.
man. Well, thanks for calling, and
Yeah.
you guys have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you, Jarvis.
Give me some rest.
Do. See you later.
All right, bye.
Bye. Well, clearly the frustration came out in
I
Jarvis's
know.
voice.
Can't blame him. Yes.
And he's not the only one, I'm sure. A lot of the native community probably feels the same way.
Yes.
And the local community, particularly the judge of Harney County, he has really been out. When they were at that meeting at the high school, for people who didn't see it, the judge got the microphone and went right up and started pointing at the guys up in the stands. You need to get out of town.
And he was cheered on by
Yeah.
the entire community. Go home, go home.
Yeah.
Like,
It was great. That
it was a
didn't
good
pull any
moment. YouTube
punches.
it if you haven't
And,
seen it. Yeah, it was good.
People should see it. Well, I kind of feel sorry for Jarvis because they didn't ask for this. I mean, they're trying to maintain their families and their traditions and eke out a living in the middle of nowhere,
Right.
as it practically
Very
is.
small town life. Yeah.
And they've seriously been disrupted with their kids were taken out of school. And I was kind of struck to find that they're roaming like gangs around the city in their
Yeah, I didn't
15
realize
trucks
that.
at a
10 and
time.
15 at a time.
That
That's
would
nuts.
definitely be scary if I was in the town and saw them driving
Absolutely.
around like that.
Absolutely.
And you know, they're all armed to the teeth. They're even open carrying of the rifles that they've got. So the town's intimidated, the tribe's intimidated. The letter from the employees showed how intimidated they were. You can see the letter from the refuge employees online. They just finally put a statement out just
They
the
just
other
did
day.
it today, I think.
Today?
Or, yeah, I
Or
think it was,
yesterday?
or maybe yesterday. Yeah,
Yeah,
yesterday.
I think it was yesterday. And and they talk about the death threats that they received in that letter. And Denzel Ferguson, as I mentioned before, was an activist when he lived in Bates, Oregon. I got to know him because we had similar interests. The John Day River Basin was under consideration for how they were going to manage it. Major planning for the John Day River Basin. And I, as a tribal member, of course, had to get my 2 cents worth and says, let's protect the fish and the habitat for salmon. And I was one of the few voices that spoke out on behalf of the salmon, let me tell you. But Denzel got the courage to speak out, and his main target were the cattle that are coming on to stream beds, mainly the upper streams, pristine springs, beautiful clear water. The cattle roam through it, tramp down, stamp in the mud, make it muddier. They eat the plants that are supposed to shade the water to keep it cool and clean. And their excrement goes right into the system as well, right into the water. So cattle are a serious problem. And the federal government gets 30 cents for every dollar they spend on grazing fees. The money they make from grazing fees, they spend $1, they get 30 cents back. In the private sector, the grazing fees for a rancher to put grazing cattle on private land is about $3 and something. For every dollar that the private landowner spends, he gets $3 back from the grazing fees that he charges on private land. So it's already a racket that these cattle ranchers have with the federal government taking money from us by way of the grass and the fodder that the cattle eat off of our land for next to nothing. And that's been that way for a long time, and it continues to this day.
Yeah.
And yet we've got people complaining about grazing costing so much, and they should be able to graze their cattle wherever they want to, as long as they want, because it's their land. And it's just gotten completely out of hand.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said about the competing species that they take off those lands, like the wild horses. which are a really hot topic lately. I know in Colorado, the BLM took a bunch. Oh my gosh, I wish I knew how many it was. I would have looked it up before I came on the show if I knew I was going to talk about it. But it was in the tens of thousands of wild horses off the land so that ranchers could graze their cattle on there. And then they sold them at auction. And even though it's against federal law, somehow it went through slipped through the cracks that these horses got auctioned off for feed. So they were slaughtered for feed, which is in violation of a federal law. It was tens of thousands of horses, beautiful wild horses, so that ranchers could have more land to graze their cattle. It is, like you said, it's a racket on a lot of levels. It really is, financially and biodiversity-wise, what these cattle do to these lands.
Well, here's another case, Dayna, for those of you who want to know. Sage grouse. Management of the sage grouse has been a huge issue now in the entire western United States. And there was a big move to get the sage grouse protected under the Endangered Species Act, which made perfect sense because they're losing their habitat. They're getting smaller and smaller. And the numbers are smaller and smaller. So instead of giving them the protection they deserve, they worked out some sort of compromise now where the ranchers have to manage their land to help the sage grouse, which they said they've done all along, but the sage grouse are dying out.
Right.
And I was seriously disappointed to hear that the lobbyists for the ranchers, who got the sage grouse unprotected, or to say, let's work out this management agreement and everybody, let's do it all together. We all agree to do this. We'll manage sage grouse together. You don't need to do a listing on the Environmental Protection Act. And we'll see how it goes. It just started.
Money. Who's got the most money in the lobby?
They just went into this special management plan for sage grouse. And I don't know how it's going to work if they don't put land aside for they breed in what's called a lek, and these little areas 20, 30 yards around where they dance and display and make love, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And they're running out of room to do that. So we need to protect the sage grouse. It's serious. They're getting down to next to nothing.
Yeah.
So that's another issue that the rancher lobbyists have so much power that they can stop a listing in the name of cooperative management. And it sounds great. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think they're going to work to protect
it's
the
proven
sage grouse.
not to work, so why are we going to keep allowing something that's not working? Like, when is it going to be enough,
Yeah.
When it's extinct, when it's gone, when
Yeah.
when it's only in one place, what does it take? So.
Yeah. Well, Dayna, I'm really glad you came tonight.
Yeah, thanks so much for having
you could be our
me.
guest. How far along are you on your studies at Lewis and Clark Law
I'm in
School?
my first year still.
Oh.
So I've got
Is
2
it
years
a
to
three-year
go.
three-year program?
Yeah.
And you want to practice law when you get out?
I do. This summer I have an internship with an environmental justice program in Portland called Opal, and I'm really excited about that. And I just want to keep on this social justice track I'm on. Right now I'm externing for Law at the Margins, and I want to make a career out of being a voice and an intellect combined, for some of these issues that really, really need action and to be spoken about, but that just are so often swept under the rug. So.
Great. Sounds good.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned when you were an undergrad, you minored in environmental sociology.
I double majored. Yeah. So I had. I basically did two. So I did a political science degree, and I also did an environmental sociology degree.
And I'll tell you what that means to me.
What?
Environmental sociology. Having a social relationship with nature.
Yep.
Have you talked to a tree? How about a flower? or a bird, you might want to consider having a social relationship with Mother Nature. I'm not saying that she'll talk back, or you may not hear her if she does, but there is a conversation to be had with Mother Nature. So go out and be alone with Mother Nature and experience Mother Nature, breathe her in. Here's a good way to experience Mother Nature. Lay down on your belly and drink from a spring. Or better yet, grab a branch of huckleberries and eat them right off the branch. That's a good way to get close to nature. That's one of my favorite ways. So environmental sociology kind of triggered that thought in me, how we do have a relationship with our Mother Earth. Native people have maintained that for years and years, and we still are maintaining our relationship with Mother Earth. We still have our laws, our natural laws of water, roots, meat, and berries that sustained us for thousands of years. So those are the things that we live for as a people.
It's beautiful.
The Hittite.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
I'm glad you think so, Dayna.
I do.
Well, we're running out of time here, getting down to the last of our show. There was one event coming up I wanted to mention for students out there, a scholarship and financial aid workshop for all Native American students is coming up this Saturday, January 23rd from 10 to 2. Oh, that's during the Bernie Sanders rally at Pioneer Courthouse Square. You'll have to go right from this to the Bernie Sanders afterwards. It's at the Native American Student Community Center. Of course, the Jackson Street, 710 Southwest Jackson Street at the south end of the Portland State campus. I imagine you're always searching for money for school.
Oh, we are, yes.
Yeah. And this is very important for all students to be, this time of the year is when you want to be making money for next fall, applying for scholarships and grants and getting everything lined up for school next year. So this is an opportunity to learn more about scholarships at Portland State tomorrow, 10 to 12, right before the Bernie Sanders rally at Pioneer Courthouse Square. I don't know how they're going to fit everybody into Pioneer Courthouse Square. It's kind of small, and I expect a large crowd.
Yep.
And you may need an umbrella if you come. Just so you'll know, I'm voting for Bernie Sanders for president.
Me
It's
too.
not that, he didn't ask, he's not paying me money, but
Feel the burn.
right on. Thank you, Karma and Jim, for the hard work you did behind the scenes. And Jarvis, it was great to get Jarvis on the phone out of his busy life. And we'll be back the third Thursday of February for our next show. And I don't know who we've got lined up, but we're bound to have somebody. So take care out there, and good night from Native Nations.